Imagine that over the course of a year, with some effort, not terribly much, you could improve your law firm from marketing to intake to operations to HR by 20-25%, meaning you could either get more capacity, a lot more capacity, like with the same people, they'll be able to get a lot more done, or you'll be able to shrink your costs and thus squeeze a lot more profit out of the existing business. What would that be worth to you? Well, Derek Weber and I talked about strategic implementation of AI across all of your functional areas, RITs, revenue impact zones in your business, as I call it. And I love the way that Derek thinks strategically about implementing AI throughout the business. You gotta listen to this episode. We talked about it for a solid hour. It's a brilliant guy, great insights. He explains how to do it, first steps, how to become AI first, AI leading company, and why it's so incredibly important to implement that in your business, in your law firm today. Because if you don't, you're going to start falling behind your competition, and that will do a nasty thing to your business in the next 3 to 5 years. Enjoy the episode, learn, and most importantly, implement what you learn.
Hi there. I have a small but really meaningful favor to ask you. I watch at the stats on our YouTube channel and Spotify channel, wherever most people listen and watch our podcast. And I see that over 80% of everybody who listens to it regularly is not a subscriber. I'm asking you to subscribe to this channel. And the reason for that is my mission and the mission of my team is to help as many small law firm owners to learn how to transform their law firms into better businesses, and so they in turn enjoy better lives. When you hit subscribe button, you tell these platforms that this is content worth listening, worth viewing, and they in turn will show it to many other small law firm owners and hopefully help me fulfill our mission of helping them create a better business and enjoy better lives. So would you please do me this favor? It would mean the world to me, and hit the subscribe button. And my promise to you is that I will continue to work hard at creating good content with practical ideas that help you and your teams grow better law firms. Thank you.
Welcome to Grow a Law Podcast. I have an amazing guest with me here today. Derek Weber created a couple of interesting companies. One of them is Lead with AI, and Lead with AI is a training and education company that helps law firm owners think about AI and AI implementation strategically rather than haphazardly, which I find that overwhelming majority of law firms, most businesses, think about AI haphazardly. Like, I've seen this tool, I think it's cool, I think it's going to solve an XYZ problem, and we're going to implement it. So I've heard Derek on a friend of mine podcast, Pilma podcast with Mr. Hardison. And I really enjoyed how you framed the conversation about AI. And so I wanted you to be on this podcast and talk to our audience about how to think about implementing AI strategically so it actually produces much better results than those that you can get from haphazard implementation. Welcome to the show, Derek.
Happy to be here, Sasha. Excited to talk with you about all things AI and how it can help law firms.
Yeah, you've started your AI journey well before most of us have really caught on to AI thing.
So the long story here is it's kind of a 20-year vision, 10-year goal, 5-year plan that actually opened up the opportunity for me to get started a little bit earlier. So growing up, I grew up on a 5th generation dairy farm and had never left the country. And when I went to college, I studied abroad and spent a semester. So I'd never left the country once. And then all of a sudden I left the country for 5 months and went to 13 different countries all at once. And I remember at the time looking like, oh, that's weird that they do that. Oh, that's weird that they do that. And there was a moment where it clicked for me. It was like, oh, no, it's not weird. It's just different that they do that. They would look at what we do as weird. There's a lot of different buttons and levers to push and pull and live life however you may want to create the type of life that you want. And I can remember at that time, which are big thoughts for a 20-year-old at this point. And I remember at that time saying, like, when I have kids, I want to get them exposed to as many different cultures and in as many different countries as I can, as early as I can, so that they have this big worldview starting out as opposed to having to have it be a paradigm shift. And so fast forward, so I started my marketing company, GBG Marketing. So I actually started that the summer before my senior year in college, which has now been 23 years. And when I was looking at that and was looking out as when I wanted to have this opportunity to get my kids exposed, as I wanted to live overseas for an extended amount of time. And so when I first started having kids, my wife and I talked to other entrepreneurs who were a little bit further ahead in their journey. And they all said like in the 8 to 10 range, because that's when they're old enough that they'll remember it, be shaped by it, be formed by it, but young enough that they still want to hang out with you. And so I circled out when having both kids of the summer of 2023. And so took a 3.5, almost 4 month sabbatical, lived in Barcelona for an extended period of time on the coast of Spain, went to Paris. So had all of this really great and wonderful experience with my family, which was incredible. And going into that, I was talking with my second in command and my partner about, okay, what do I want to keep on my plate, and what do we need to delegate? And the more those conversations kept going, it went, you know what, actually, let's just clear the deck. I'm going to delegate everything that's part of my responsibility right now, because my second in command at that time was stepping up into what she's now the president of GBG Marketing. So she was stepping up into that role and learning what that was going to take. So when I came back from sabbatical, I had space. And part of the thing that came back onto my plate was research and development of like, where's marketing going? Where's the trajectory? Where do we need to be focusing on? What's around the corner? And at that time was also about the time when ChatGPT had really started to get some momentum and started to get some press. And so I started playing around with it, and it wasn't great, but it was something special. And so I knew at that time, so back in 23, I knew that this was where marketing was going, and I was pretty sure this was where business was going. And so that summer, we committed our entire organization, our entire company, to be human-centric, AI-powered. And we were going to rebuild our entire marketing company from the inside out to create and integrate AI into everything that we did. Not just go out and buy a software and layer it over the top, but how do we actually make it a part of our DNA and who we are as an organization? And so that started this journey. But that journey was very bumpy along the way too. So one day I'm standing in front of the entire company proclaiming, this is where we're going, this is the future, this is what we're going to do. The next day, I'm working in ChatGPT and I can't get it to write a social media post that an intern would be able to do. I'm like, uh-oh, this is a problem. But for each roadblock along the way, there was a lot of lessons learned and trying to figure out, okay, what does it actually take to be able to use and implement AI inside of our organizations and not just paper it over? And really what it takes is the series of building blocks and training documentation and going one brick at a time, one block at a time, and building it up from one little piece on top of each other. And so as we kept building and implementing and having a lot more success inside of our organization, there was a lot of people who were like, hey, can I pick your brain on this? Hey, can I pick your brain on that? How are you doing this? How are you doing that? And so pretty soon my brain was just getting like picked out of my ears. And so I said like, all right, time out. So I pulled all of the things that I had learned and a lot of the tools that I was leveraging and put together a couple workshops. So put those on of like how to get started. And here's the real key is leveraging generative AI platforms like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini is really in those custom assistants, the custom GPTs, the Claude projects, the Gemini gems, the Copilot agents. That's where the magic lies. And the real key is in how do you create the training documentation that takes these tools from being just a general generative AI to really small model, very specific, very useful, and very helpful. And so those workshops was a series of workshops, and they were really impactful, really successful. And I thought that would be the end of it. I'm like, okay, cool, all good. But at the end of that, one of the ladies, she owns a retail business in Texas. She goes, "You're not done with me." And I'm like, this is what I had in play. What else you got in mind? She's like, I don't know, but you're not done with me. Like, and so that started the continuation of creating Lead with AI, which is now a membership organization that focuses on the training and implementation of there's a whole 12-month curriculum that goes from Like for her, she had a free ChatGPT account to a few months later, she's leveraging custom GPTs and other custom assistants for all of her team, for product selectors and all sorts of things. And so this whole journey started by just creating a little bit of space, having the ability and the awareness to kind of see where things are going, and then staying focused on what does it take to move around one roadblock after another, after another, after another.
Yeah, it's an amazingly simple approach, but most of us do not think about it that way, right? Like as I mentioned earlier, it's a haphazard approach. Like I've heard there's AI, I've seen this AI that writes demand letters for PI law firm. Great. How good is it? It's pretty good. Let's buy. Let's see how it works.
Yeah.
And that doesn't write them exactly the way that you want them to, and you struggle a little bit. It's very haphazard. I'm curious, you're working with cohorts of law firm owners. If you already have any success stories that indicate wins that they have had by implementing various AIs, strategically implementing various AIs in their firms.
Yeah, there's a couple different approaches, right? So there's the top down, buy this big suite of softwares, and you're going to come over the top, and it's going to layer and do everything. And then there's also out of the box softwares that are very vertically focused and can do one specific thing really well. So on the out of the box softwares, what I'm seeing right now and what I'm hearing from a lot of law firms are the ones that are kind of the agency management AIs that they go across horizontally across the whole thing. They're seeing some things that go really well. Some things they actually end up spending more time fixing than they do would have done on their own. And there's not that repetitive learning that it's actually getting better. In the out-of-box softwares, I am hearing that ones that are vertically focused, they get pretty good results out of those, and they're seeing some pretty good time savings. Then from the other side, where the lead with AI approach is more of coming from the bottom up, learning the methodology, learning the approach, and starting to build your own training documentation. And that's seeing huge time savings, but it's not in necessarily the specific legal work. It's more the stuff that gets in the way and the annoying things that you have to do, but aren't necessarily the client-facing legal work. So it could be around your marketing. It could be around your sales, your intake calls. It could be operationally the things that either, because I know a lot of law firms that I talk to, a lot of their time's not actually of law firm owners isn't spent practicing law. It's spent half the time or maybe more is spent running the business. And that's where a lot of times there's huge efficiency gains that can be created by walking through a process where you're building the training out in a methodical way. So even when you talk about in ways where you're like on an intake call, I always love to give this example of most of the time when you're getting if you have the transcript of an intake call and you try to get analysis of it, if you put a prompt in that says, analyze this intake call and tell me what could have been gone better. What ends up happening is you get this generic, not really helpful, not that useful response back. And this is oftentimes because people don't truly understand like how AI is actually built and structured, the generative AI, the large learning models. And the way to think about it is like this genius level intern with access to the greatest library in the history of libraries, which is anything and everything that's ever been put on the internet, good, bad, or indifferent. And this genius level intern walks into this library with this Post-it note that says, analyze this call. What it's going to do is these large language models are probabilistic engines, which means they're predicting what's the next letter, the most likely next letter, not next word, not next sentence, not next paragraph, next letter. And what they're basing that off of is the training documentation that's from that whole library. So think about a bell curve of the most likely, most common next letter based off the library of everything. And so if you don't give it much more direction, you're going to get the most common, the most average, and therefore the most unhelpful answer that it's possibly going to come back with. And a lot of times it's going to just make it up, which is where hallucinations come into play. It's not hallucinating and just going off the rails. It's hallucinating because you asked it to do something and it's going to come up with the most probable next answer. Now, if you hand that genius level intern you probably heard of the term prompt engineering. So if you talk about like act as a this, and here's the a lot of the contextual input that you want to provide. So you want to give it information about your firm and your target market and who you focus on and what you do, and then get very specific with the task, because that analyze the sales intake call is really look at our process. Here's our criteria of success. Here's the transcript. Review this. Here's who's in the call. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. These are the triggers that you should be listening for. Here's the objections that you should be listening for. Here's our sales process that you should be judging those off of. And then here's how I want that analysis ran. So analyze this call is really 15, 20 steps. And so if you're getting generic vanilla answers, it's because you haven't provided enough input. If it's giving you like surface level, inch deep, mile wide, is because you haven't broken down the steps well enough. And then if you're getting something that's not super helpful, you haven't structured the output in a way that's very specific. And so when you create a prompt that is going to walk through and talk through all of those elements, now you're, instead of a post-it note, you're handing that genius level intern, handing a full page description of what you're looking for. All right, in this instance, act as an expert sales law firm sales take analysis consultant. We're a law firm that handles these types of clients. Now that intern knows to go to the law library. Now you know that general vicinity, and you're giving a little bit more context. Even better now is when you take that to the next step, because what's hard is every time having to come up with that full page. What ends up happening is if each time you're doing that, it's not going to be consistent. And that's where the consistency comes in, is when you're actually leveraging these custom assistants and building the training documentation. Instead of just having a sentence about who you are, now you have your law firm strategic plan, your organizational chart, your ideal client persona. You load in all these documents. And so now that genius level intern goes into the library and knows that that whole bookcase is specific to your firm. And now you can say, look on that shelf and that book on that page, this paragraph. And now all of a sudden that prediction engine isn't taking the general knowledge from all the library of everything. It's taking the specific knowledge from your small training that you're providing it. And that's where you go from getting very generic, very vanilla, very unhelpful information that takes you more time to edit and refine than would have done to yourself, to having really useful, really helpful, really powerful outputs. And when you take this methodical approach, that's one little block, and now you start stacking these blocks on top of each other, and that's the real opportunity that most people don't want to take the time to take the slow, methodical approach that is really required to do this really well.
That is an awesome explanation. Let me put it into my own words, and you'll confirm whether I understood this correctly or not. And also, I'll try to simplify it. You're quite technical. Folks who listen and watch this podcast, they're not sophisticated business executives, so some of the things may have gone over some heads. So I'll try to simplify it a little bit. Mr. or Mrs. Law Firm owner, as you're watching this, or as you're listening to this, or as you may be reading a blog post about this, what you're thinking about it, like, what's on it for me? Like, how does this make any difference to me? So let me paint you a picture. Let's imagine that you operate a $5 million revenue law firm. And you have now graduated to the point where you're mostly a CEO of your law firm. You do not practice law very much, which, congratulations to you. It's an amazing position. Being a successful CEO of a law firm pays a lot more money than being a really great lawyer. It's just a fact of life. And now as an executive, your primary objective is not to do law, not to talk to clients, not to work on cases, but to work on just one big project, which is making your law firm, your business, more successful. So you do $5 million and you may be thinking, well, how do I double this company in revenue? My net profit margin, your pre-tax profit is, let's say, 15%. So on that $5 million, you're making $750,000 a year. Now you're thinking, how do I double my revenue, go from 5 million to 10 million, and also go from 15% net profit margin to 20% net profit margin, which would take you from cool $750,000 a year to really cool $2 million a year. If you do $10 million in revenue and do $2 million in net pre-tax profit, your law firm is a highly valuable asset that many other law firms would be very happy to buy at about 6 to 7x of that net pre-tax profit, meaning you could exit for like $12-14 million. And that's the kind of money where you could be like, hey, maybe I don't have to work again. No, maybe I'll take a sabbatical for 5-6 years. Maybe I'll never work again because you can, et cetera, et cetera. So now you've worked with consultants and advisors before, and you're like, I don't want to go and spend hours talking to an advisor. I want to do some of my own thinking, but it's a lot. So instead of doing my own thinking on my own, locked in this box, I'm going to go talk to AI. And let's say you decide to talk to ChatGPT because you're kind of using ChatGPT. And so you tell ChatGPT everything that I just said, you compress it further in 30 seconds. Like, I am so-and-so. I do this much in revenue, this much in profit, and I want to go to this much revenue and this much in profit. Let's take a look at it strategically. Let's look at my marketing. Let's look at my intake/sales. Let's take a look at my operations and my HR. And let's find ways to double the size of my business and revenue and significantly increase my profitability. And let's work on it department by department. I think the highest gains we're probably going to make is by the improvement intake, because this is where easy profitability and revenue gains can be made. Unless your intake is spectacular, which I've never seen spectacular intake at any law firm. So those are quick gains. Then you're going to look at marketing, then you're going to look at operations, and you just tell ChatGPT, let's talk about increasing revenue and increasing profitability. I bet by having a few hours worth of discussions, you're going to find solutions that will lead to significant improvements across every single one of those departments. And then you can take it to your human advisor and be like, here's everything that ChatGPT and I put together. What you think? By the way, working with ChatGPT doing that will cost you about $20 a month. You do not need to spend money on like advanced model. Working with a high quality advisor, my partner and I have a couple of those, between $500 and $800 an hour. Did I capture that about right?
Yeah. And that is one of the absolute best use cases right out of the gate, is creating a business advisor that is serving as that strategic consultant.
Yeah.
So, but imagine that strategic consultant right out of the box is trained on all the things that you just talked about and has all that documentation built into it. And you've now got a real-time, all the time advisor that you can work through and chat through, talk about things, and really elevate your thinking in a way that not only gets things done, because most people are looking at AI as a way to do things faster, to automate. The problem is if you automate chaos, you just get more chaos faster. When you start actually, once again, building it from the base up and create that infrastructure, and you're creating that strategic direction, you have that strategic partner that you're able to work it through those thoughts, and like, how do you build out your strategic plan, that allows you to go so much, as let's say, slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yeah.
By actually slowing down, you'll actually go faster, farther, because this is a lot of times where that comes into play. And that's a big part of, it's not just faster, it's better, because it's going to open up your thinking in ways that are different. And the other thing is that you can start to do is, like, you have your business advisor, you can have one that's trained on individual roles and create your role sidekicks. And then you can create specialists that are ones that can advise on very specialized elements. And there's things that you can actually train to do some of the work. And so, like, what we work with inside of our marketing company with our team is what we have as a 10-80-10 approach, is that we want our team spending 10% of their time putting together the parts, the pieces, the resources, getting all the context right, had AI do 80% of the heavy lift on the work, and then 10% the humans coming back in, reviewing, refining, polishing, putting it together, packaging it up, and sending it out. And where we had our team focus first, and you want to talk about a way to increase employee engagement, employee satisfaction, and we actually just found out early today, we got named one of the best places to work in St. Louis, which is pretty exciting. But over the last 3 years that we've implemented AI into our organization, we've grown top line by 30%. We've added over $500,000 to the bottom line. And our employee satisfaction, our employee retention, our customer satisfaction, our customer retention, and our customer results are all the highest they've ever been. And those are not mutually exclusive. Those are very closely interrelated. And a big part of the employee satisfaction bump that we've gotten is because where we had them started, we were saying like, all right, I want each of you to make a list of what are the things you have to do on a recurring basis? What are the things you have to do on daily, weekly, monthly basis that you don't love doing, but has to be done and isn't necessarily client facing? So maybe like one step back from the client. And what we did then is that's the list that we worked from, and we worked together, learning and training and working together to create specialists that would be able to go 10, 80, 10 on it. So we just kept 10, all the things that people don't love to do. That's the best way to get really great customer satisfaction, is just to get rid of the things they don't love to doing, because that opened them up to do the things that they actually are great at doing, that they love doing, that drive the biggest results. And we're slowly just removing all those little roadblocks and the things that get in the way of great thinking and great work, the things that only humans can do. And so there's so many things in every organization that makes such a huge difference. You know, in law firms, obviously with anything that's got PHI, you got to be super mindful of from a confidentiality and making sure you're not having any HIPAA violations. But for non-HIPAA related documentation, you can create some really high quality trainings that are super quick and easy that will take all those legal documents, all the depositions, all of the intake, or all those initial documents you have to sort and sift and read, and it's hours and hours and hours. You can cut that down by 80%. And now you're actually interacting with the documents. So there's tools that you can do that inside of a Claude project or a custom GPT or Notebook LM, where you can actually make those documents come to life, and you can actually chat with them in a way that allows you to sift and sort and get clarity in ways that you probably never could before. And that's the thing, is when you go from using AI as an assistant that you're delegating to, because there's a progression, right? Is you go from 0 to 1, where people are looking at the resistant and they're not really even considering it. They're not doing anything with it. Levels 1 to 10, they're seeing AI as a glorified Google. Instead of putting something in Google, they put something in ChatGPT. When you move from that 1 to 10 into the 10 to 100, and you see it as an assistant, it's something to delegate to. No different than an executive assistant. And you're really starting to work on the accuracy and really getting the accurate results. And that's where you start working on that prompt engineering and getting more focused. And that first one, that 10 to 100, that's where you can really start to see efficiency gains, but it's the same level of efficiency gains that you get by delegating to another employee. When you get over that hump and you start to see AI as not just an assistant, but as a partner, when you're using it as a strategic partner to think about your business differently, or you're building these tools on top of each other, you get to that 100 to 1,000. That's where you get exponential results, where you're getting the accuracy, you're getting the consistency, and you're getting better, more accurate, faster results. And those start stacking on top of each other in some pretty remarkable ways. But you have to move through the progression. You can't start at 1 and skip ahead to 1,000. And when you take that methodical approach, that's how you can actually build this inside your firm, have your team adopting and integrating. Because it's one thing if you as the owner is doing it, it's a whole nother thing. You know, it's the whole African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. The real dramatic impact happens when you get your team aligned and working together on this with you.
Yeah, it's a really great way of thinking about that. Yet, I'm picturing most folks who are listening to this or watching this, they're probably thinking to themselves, I don't have the time to do it. I am getting up there in age. I maybe practice, or run my law firm for another 5, 7, 10 years. And then I'm going to retire, sell this thing, do something. I don't want to do it. And to those of you who've had one of those thoughts, I want to tell you that if you don't do it, but your competitors do, your business is going to be in trouble, because they will optimize their production costs, meaning their cost of delivering service will go down. They're going to deploy some of that newly found profit to getting more clients. That will drive up case acquisition cost for all of you, except that you will not have that newly found margin. Your margin will be the same. So your ability to attract new clients will actually decline, and thus your business will shrink. And then you will be wondering, just like the title of the book, who moved my cheese? Where did it go and why? We're still doing great work. We're doing everything that we used to do, and we're doing it at the same quality level, but our business is worse off. And some of our better employees may be leaving somewhere else because they pay better and their work environment is cooler. It may not be that much better, but it's cooler. More cool folks hang out there, not here. So today, AI is not nice to have. It's a must-have if you want to stay competitive for your prospective clients, for existing clients, and for your employees, and thus for you as the stakeholder or owner of your AI. But I'm also thinking, because most people think about AI exactly like you said, right? It's another Google, or it's a tool here or a tool there. Like, how would you recommend that people approach it systematically?
Yeah.
I guess there's some learning curve to, like, how do I wrap my mind around AI as part of my business, the entire business, not as a tool here or a tool there.
Yeah. So in general, I think there's still a window of time. There is still, if you start intentionally and strategically right now, you're still going to be.
Sorry, and right now we're recording this mid-March 2026. So if you're watching this in 2028, landscape may look completely different.
Yeah, you're probably already out of business if you're just starting. No, not quite. But I think right now, if you get started right now, you're still well ahead of the curve. And there's still, in professional services like marketing and legal, there's probably a 2-year window where it's still a competitive advantage. Where if you're strategically integrating AI into your organization, you have the opportunity there's going to be profit for the companies that are forward thinking and that are integrating. And it's exactly what you're talking about, is especially in the law firm, it's already happening. I was on a panel a few months ago, and there's a firm in California who's doing exactly what you're talking about. So they started as an AI first company. So there was a handful of partners that all sold and started AI at the center and built out. And in 2 years, they've grown to have 100 attorneys and 400 employees and have had massive growth. And he said explicitly what you said is their business strategy is they go into a market, they intentionally drive up the cost of acquisition because they know their 400 employees, if not for AI, would be closer to 1,000. So their operational marginal cost is so much lower that they can afford to intentionally drive up the cost of acquisition to a point where everyone else just bails out. So they will intentionally go into a market, drive up the cost of acquisition until it collapses, and then they just take over the whole thing. Because then at that point,
they destroy competition.
And the law firms at that point their value, maybe were a 6 or a 7x before that. Now you're probably getting a 2 or a 3x, and it's predominantly on an earn out. That's happening right now. I would say that's not the rule. That's the first time I've heard that, but I am hearing that more often. So I think we have a 2-year window where it's a competitive advantage. You've got 5 years until it's table stakes. At that point, if you've not been intentionally integrating inside your organization, inside of your firm, in that 4 to 5 year range, you're going to start to feel it. It's going to be harder. Everything's going to be a little bit harder. The margins are going to be a little more compressed. You're going to come up against more challenges. And then on the other side of 5 years, you start getting in that 5 to 7 year window. It's going to be really hard to even stay in business. And then that lawyer that's saying like, hey, I've got 5 to 7 years, I'm just going to ride this out and then sell. In 5 to 7 years, if you've not integrated AI into your organization, you have an asset that's probably not sellable. You're probably selling a customer list, which is going to be an earnout.
Not for most law firms.
You don't have a business. You don't have a firm you're selling. You have a customer list that you're selling, and it's just not an asset at that point. And so, the biggest recommendation that I have is in what I see most people get stuck is they hear the podcast, they read the articles of all these thought leaders that are talking about agents and automation, and they try to skip ahead all the way to the end, and either they skip ahead and it doesn't work, they get frustrated and they're like, it's not there yet, or they get overwhelmed and they just freeze and don't do anything. And so my recommendation is understand where you are and then look at what's the next step right in front of you and ignore everything else. because the challenge is there's just so much information, so many tools, there's so many things coming at us every day, all the time. And
That's
it's
a really good
overwhelming.
thought.
And then all of a sudden, the only thing you're doing is spending time reading and researching and no time actually getting in there and implementing and doing. So my recommendation, pick one, maybe two LLMs. My favorite's Claude. We do some stuff in ChatGPT, we do some stuff in Claude, do a little bit in Gemini. But I found the way that document management for Claude is the best. And then also their innovations that they're coming out with Claude Code, Claude Cowork, like their interactions and connections are the best. So if you're going to just try one, my recommendation would be start there with Claude. Start with one and just get good at one tool. Don't chase all the shiny objects. Don't chase the new article, because most of these are just wrappers put over the top of these LLMs anyway. And most of them are more marketing, and this is coming from a marketing company, more marketing than substance. Most of these companies are more focused on how to get eyeballs and valuation than they are to serve you well. And so I'm also, a lot of us have been around long enough to watch tech trends come and tech trends go. And we've also seen bubbles. And this is going to be a bubble. There is going to be carnage. There is going to be fallout. In the same way that if we go back to the late 90s, there's no way that AOL and Yahoo aren't going to be the kings of the internet. They literally controlled everything. They don't exist in any meaningful way now. The same thing with the major players that are in play right now. Who knows who's going to comes out on top of this? But what I think we can all confidently say is that there are going to be some of these companies, these early risers, are not going to be the long haulers. Some of these will fall off. And so if you're completely honed in and locked in into one software or one model or one program, you're putting yourself and your business at risk. And so I would say, as you're learning, pick a tool, and this may sound contradictory, pick a tool, get good at it, but do it in a way that you're learning the fundamentals and how generative AI works, so that you're not stuck inside one platform. Really try to do things that are platform agnostic. And when you learn and understand the basics, they're all built on the same foundational rails. And once you actually learn and understand how they work, you can move from one to the other. And it's not categorically like mass failure or loss of efficiency. So my biggest recommendation is know where you are, run your own race, ignore everything else, look at what's one step and maybe two steps in front of you, but not beyond that, because it's overwhelming and it's not helpful. And frankly, by the time you get to the point where you can actually use that information that's 3, 4, 5, 10 steps in front of you, it will have already changed. So know where you are, know where you're going, focus one step at a time, get good in one platform, and don't chase the shiny objects.
Yeah, really well put. Derek, thank you so much for sharing all the insights. Incredibly useful. Leadwithai.com. If folks want to leadwithai.us. How do you start a journey on that site if somebody wants to check it out?
Yeah, so if you go to leadwithai.us, there's a bunch of tools and information that's readily available. So if you go there, there's information on what membership looks like. So memberships, we have a membership cohort. We do 3 cohorts a year, $499 a month, and you walk through a 12-month curriculum that takes about an hour a month of implementation to actually learn and understand, and you get access to methodologies and frameworks and tools and all that stuff. That there are free tools and methodologies that you can start to put into play. So if you go to the website, click on tools and methodologies, and the first one I would recommend is start with what's called the ITO prompt generator, ITO prompt generator, and I'm happy to provide that full link with you. I think it's just leadwithai.us/ITO, ITO. And if you go to that page, when we talked about what it takes to have the right input, the right task, and the right output, that's a quick little tool that when you use, you can brain dump and talk through, and it'll actually walk you through how to create a great prompt that's going to give you better results. So if you're in that 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and you're just getting started, that's a really, really great, easy place to get started, is on how to make better prompts, to go from that post-it note size prompt to a page-long prompt. And you're going to see the dramatic impact and results that even just enhancing the way that you're writing those prompts. That's an easy, good place to start.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Derek. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Sasha.